Welcome to the Community Conversations on COVID-19. I'm Dr. Bryan Williams, President of McCall College, the moderator of this series. McCall College is a local specialized college offering meaningful education to students of all ages. The motto of this series is Local Voices Addressing Local Issues. Our goal is to encourage vaccine participation by those who are hesitant. In Valley County, here in the state of Idaho, we have approximately 10,000 permanent residents. Approximately 3,000 of those residents will be hesitant to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Each one hesitates for any number of reasons. Our series will attempt to answer the main points of concern with local, trusted sources of information. And this is a county that values its freedom. But the freedom we're now looking for is offered by herd immunity. And that will only be achieved with the participation of those who are hesitant. We are pleased to be in week 6 of our 7 conversations. And we're particularly pleased with our theme this week, the role of government. And the trusted local source of information is our Commissioner, Elt Hasbrouck.
Thanks, Bryan. Thanks for having me. I hope I can help folks make up their mind about getting the coronavirus vaccine. This has been an interesting year for all of us because it was kind of a new thing for even local government to kind of go through and deal with. And it's been a high learning curve, but it's been very rewarding and it's been very challenging. And I'm glad I'm here and hope I can answer any questions you have.
Give us a bit of your background.
I'm a native Valley County and I was born here. I'm a 4th generation rancher. My family's been here since 1919. I care a great deal about the Valley. I've seen a lot of growth, a lot of folks come in. When I came home from college, I was encouraged by my family to do public service. And so I started out on the school board and spent a great deal of time, I think 8-9 years on that. Went on into Valley County Planning and Zoning, the Soil Conservation District, and Southern Idaho Timber Protective Association on that board for a long time. And the commissioner job was kind of the next in line. And I thought, well, all I can do is try and all I can do is say no. So I tried and I got elected. And I'm now in my 9th year as county commissioner. And I'm chairman of the board this year. I have just been elected to a 4-year term. And in the meantime, about 7 years ago, I got on the Central District Board of Health. And back in those days, it was a pretty easy board to serve on. It was, kind of your standard health district, a lot of reproductive health and vaccinations and dealing with people that come in from other countries that come into Idaho, and we help them settle in, get them tested, we get them vaccinated, get them up to date on that, find them jobs, find them a place to live. And it's a very fun board to serve on. But all of a sudden in the last year, it became a pretty heavy duty board because we had a lot of heavy decisions to make as far as the coronavirus. As you know, it was about March of last year that the virus hit Idaho, and the first thing that happened was the governor kind of came in because there was so much unknown and restricted travel, non-essential travel. And that really hurt our economy. And so we all started paying attention pretty hard right then because, like I say, the virus is so new and nobody really knew how good or how bad this is going to be. And it took a lot of education and a lot of research on being on the Board of Health to kind of follow the decisions and figure out what the best strategy was. And we've grown from there.
Thank you. That's a remarkable journey. And as I understand, 9 years as a commissioner is a little long on the tooth. It seems to be a job that people don't survive in. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you
for remaining in a position, because we need the leadership, especially in a time of crisis. And I appreciate your willingness to serve. I think public service is one of those great challenges. Can you give us a bit of a sense on what motivated you to go into public service? Because it's got to be difficult. None of us want to have the confrontation, typically, that you have to deal with constantly. What is it about public service that drew you into it and holds you in it?
Well, really, in my case, one of my edicts that I kind of live by is that the world is ran by those who show up. And if you don't show up, you can't really complain about how things turn out. Mm-hmm. And so back in my planning and zoning days and the school board days, there was a lot of controversial issues that, we had to deal with, and what we call a sticky wicky, a tough decision. And my forte, I feel like, is being able to kind of bring both sides together. And I have found over the years that if we have enough dialogue and enough conversation, eventually the solution presents itself. There is some place in the middle where we can meet. And I think that's kind of my specialty, is finding where that middle ground is. There are times, like with the mask mandate, where you kind of have to say, you know what, I got to make the decision for the people that live here, because I was catching it from both sides, right and wrong, left and right. And it came to a point where I just got to make up my mind what we got to do. And then I've got to sell it to the other two commissioners. And they supported me wholeheartedly through this whole deal. And that's when we started the mask mandate.
Let's pull the camera back out a little bit as far as your role as a county commissioner. What's your role in a public health crisis like this? And how might it have evolved over the course of the last year and a half?
Well, our biggest concern in the beginning, and it started about July, is we started getting reports from not only our local hospitals, but the hospitals down below in Twin Falls, that they were almost near capacity. And 99% of their patients were COVID-related cases. And they were actually reaching the point where they were going to have to start dealing with the COVID patients somewhere else in another facility, because they didn't have enough beds. I think in the Boise Valley alone, there was about 560 beds available, and we got up to pretty close to 500 people in those hospitals. And so we were getting to the point where, man, if somebody has a heart attack or breaks an arm, there's not going to be any place to go. Nobody's going to be able to take care of you, especially up here. We were shipping a lot of our COVID-related cases down to Boise that needed intensive care or needed more long-term care. We couldn't do that here. And so the local doctors, Dr. Irvine and Dr. Ellsworth in Cascade, basically got a hold of us and said, we need help here. We need to slow this thing down. We knew that we weren't going to stop the virus, but we had to slow it down enough to where the hospitals could handle the impact. And so in August, we came out with the mask mandate, and it was a great deal of controversy, a great deal of public input on that, but it worked great. The goal was to slow the virus down enough to where the hospitals could keep up, which was very successful. By February, we had pretty much had that dialed in, and the hospital population was going down to where they could actually start doing other non-elective surgeries and doing the things that they normally do in a hospital. Along about March, the numbers came in to where we were seeing a great reduction in hospital occupancy. Okay, now it's time to lift it. We did a great deal of education to the public, a lot of stuff through the health districts, through websites, and through our own county website to educate folks that this is what you got to do. You got to, if you can't social distance from people, you really need to wear a mask. That'll protect you and it'll protect them. And it works. Like I say, the numbers went down. And so in March, we lifted the mask mandate. We still recommend that people do that in a crowded environment, when you're around people that you don't know, or you don't think maybe you're vaccinated, or especially if somebody that's ill or not looking too good. Protect yourself. Right now, with the vaccine counts in the Valley County, we're a little over 4,000 people. So we're almost halfway there, I think, to total vaccinations. The biggest thing about that is we got a great deal of the seniors and super seniors vaccinated. They've had their chance to get a vaccine, and 2 of them the follow-up vaccine. And we feel very good about the people that really need it the most, which are the elderly, have gotten a chance to either get it have gotten it. And so I think we protected that vulnerable population, and now that, of course, it's working down the age groups, and there's discussion about possibly someday in the schools, and which will help us reach herd immunity. And herd immunity, as everybody knows, is usually around 80%, 75 to 85%. If that the virus can't spread, it can't explode on us when we have herd immunity. It's going to still be around. People are still going to get sick from it. Unfortunately, some folks may even die from it, but it's not going to be this big explosion like we had last March.
Excellent. And when we involve the teenagers and the children, then that also should assist on those numbers, because we can't vaccinate them now due to the restrictions on the vaccines.
Right, correct.
And so our numbers will struggle to get to 10,000 without children. But we hope that as the summer goes along, we'll have opportunity of dealing with our children.
Well, right now, I think you can get a vaccine if you're 16 or older.
Excellent.
And they are working on, both Moderna and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. They're all working on vaccines for the younger generation. I think those are going to be coming by midsummer, I hope. One of the big issues we had right off the bat is we were having teenage kids that were, and it's important to remember that this virus is a real sneaky virus. In other words, 40% of the people were asymptomatic, didn't even know they had the virus, but they were carriers. And that's what happened in the young kids, the young adult population, is they were catching it wherever, at school or with their friends, bring it home, and then they get around grandma and grandpa and it made them sick. And we had a lot of exposure that way. And so it was trying to educate those young people that you might have to social distance from your elderly parents or your grandparents to protect them. And it took a while for that word to get out. And so we had some teen suicide that we had to deal with. Those kids were living with the fact that I brought this home and I gave it to grandma, and they passed because of that. And that was a tough one for a long, long time, trying to educate younger people that you got to be careful when you're out there, because even though you're not sick, you're still going to bring it home and give it to mom and dad or your aunt and your uncle or so forth.
Wow, there's some challenges there. And I'd love to know, again, your background isn't medical. You've had to get up to speed on all of this conversation and engage in the political process with a background that's non-medical.
Right.
How did you get there? How did you inform yourself so that you were comfortable that you could make those wise political decisions?
Well, it's not only just like a virus, you also have to be knowledgeable about construction and roads and policy with the Forest Service and the court system and litigation. So there's a lot of things as a commissioner that you've kind of got to be a little bit of knowledge about all of it. Yeah. But in this case, with the health district, we have 2 doctors on our health district board that really helped us, educate us. I relied a lot on Dr. Irvine here in McCall and Dr. Ellsworth in Cascade, to kind of say, hey, where are we on this? What are the numbers looking like? What do you think we should do? Go to the people that know, and they're the ones that can advise you. And it's a matter of knowing those people as a commissioner, who you can talk to and who you can trust, and who you're going to get, common sense kind of statements from. And in this job, you read a lot. I read probably 4 or 5 hours a day on different subjects, trying to keep up with, okay, this is coming down the road. I have to know what it's all about, whether it's an appeal on a subdivision or a new kind of agreement with maybe DF on some roads, or I have to be able to understand all that before we get that into the meeting. So I'm not sitting there delaying everybody asking these questions that I should know. So you have to study up, and you have to, know the people that you can call and contact and to get that information.
Thank you. That's an awful lot of hard work, and I just appreciate that. You're very much in the political space. For you to be a commissioner, you've first got to engage in the political arena. You've got to win support in your political, in your side of the political conversation, and then you've got to go to the entire community and present yourself as a political person. Clearly, this this crisis became politicized early. And it seemed to be something that political people all throughout the country used for their own conversations and for their political purposes. So I'm sure that was a bit uncomfortable for you, because we probably came into this crisis not realizing how politicized it would happen and how quickly that would happen. And so my sense is, so please help us understand that politicization of the public health. And then the question might be, well, what in the world do we do to control the politics as we move through this crisis and we begin to realize that it's a part of any crisis? The politics, help us understand that.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Years ago, I'm sure your parents, you've heard your parents talk about it, that when something like this hit the country, everybody helped each other. They helped take care of each other. They didn't question really what was right or wrong. And as we've gotten more into a mass communication society where we have, a lot more knowledge, a lot more stuff on YouTube and on web pages, that people are more exposed to information. And a lot of it, I think, is not completely correct. Even our county up here has changed a great deal just in the 9 years I've been a commissioner. I mean, in the beginning there, we had a lot more conservative people. And over the years, especially the last 5 years, there's a lot more liberal folks that have moved up here. And to me, everybody's liberal and everybody's conservative. Just depends on what subject you're talking about, whether it's education dollars or it's, social programs. Everybody has something they feel strongly about. So my job as a commissioner is to listen to that input and judge what I think is probably kind of the middle path to take. They say the art of politics is making half the people mad and the other half happy. If you've done that, that's supposed to be successful. But it's interesting. I know our governor has caught a lot of hell over the last year, especially from the legislature. They've tried to take some of the powers away from him to declare the natural disasters and all that kind of stuff, which qualifies the county for a lot of extra funding. But, I'm not sure we're ever going to have another pandemic. This might be the only one for another 100 years since the Spanish flu. But I think our system worked. I think, what we did in the past worked. It gave one person the authority, the governor, to say, hey, we've got a problem here. We've got to start figuring out a solution. And if you turn that over to a legislative function with that many people in the legislature, I don't think you would ever get any kind of a declaration of a disaster or an emergency. So I like the system the way it is now. I hope it doesn't get changed. I know there's a lot of controversy in the legislature to change it. Some bills that, they want to outlaw mass mandates. Well, that's really kind of silly, because if you think about the coronavirus, that's all we had for mass and social distancing. We didn't have any other magic bullet. We didn't have any magic vaccine. It was like, we've got to learn as we go here, and let's not challenge the direction that we're going. And that's what happened. Was a lot of folks felt like their civil liberties were being infringed on. And to me, I had a real hard time with that one, because to me, an infringement on a civil liberty is something that's forever. It's something that, a law is passed or an ordinance is passed or something that's going to be forever. We knew this was going to be a short-term deal, and we're going to have to get through that. And then we can get back to normal, which I think we're getting very close now to getting back to normal. But I didn't feel like we were taking civil liberties away from anyone. I felt like I was protecting, especially our seniors and super seniors, because they are the ones that were most vulnerable. And I think what we did was the right thing.
Thank you. I'd like to take you back to the removal of the mask mandates. You've articulated very carefully why we needed them and what we needed to do to protect our citizenry. Walk us through your political instincts as you're now recognizing that it may need to change. And you've been listening to both sides for a long time. So walk me through as you tried to sense that out. How did you come to then the decision, the time has come, remove the mask mandate?
Well, in the beginning, when we did the mask mandate, I had about 1,400 emails and texts from people from up here, and some from down below, but mostly up here, they were adamantly upset, very upset that we did that. And I knew there was folks that weren't going to like it because, it's a change. It's something that we all have to do for a while. People didn't like doing that. We went through the winter. We started reducing the numbers in the hospitals. The hospitals told us, hey, the data looks great. The numbers are going down. We can handle the load now. And so we got into March and our numbers are going way down, especially up here. And we thought, now is the time. We've educated people. We've explained the virus to them and how it's asymptomatic and how it can spread, what the symptoms are, what to watch out for, how to take care of yourself. It's time now to give that responsibility back to the people. And that's why we did it in March. And I think these last 2 weeks, we haven't had one case in Valley County.
Congratulations.
So we're finally kind of back to zero. That could change, I'm telling you, with a new variant, a new strain. We were concerned a little bit for the African strain that started showing up about January. That strain was very hard on young kids, 2 to 12. And we were concerned about that. And the health district did an awesome job with basically quarantining those folks, making them, stay home and take care of themselves and heal up and not spread it. And I think we've got that kind of under control. There's the what is a 117 variant out of the UK that is more infectious. It has harder side effects, harder disease to it. And so we've been kind of watching that variant as well. It is in Idaho, but because people have been practicing and masking up and taking better care of themselves, I don't think this is going to be an issue. And it's funny, the other day we were talking about it, and you haven't heard anything about flu this year. There's been hardly no flu anywhere, because I think people are more hygienic. They're washing their hands, they're social distancing, they're paying attention to what they're breathing in and where they are in our daily walks and taking better care of themselves, which is a good thing.
I'd love to know your numbers when you took it down. You had 1,400 that were upset that you imposed the masks. When you took it down, what was that reaction?
I think I got about 30 emails from folks that were mad at me because we took it down.
Okay.
They wanted us to keep it going, but you have to remember the main goal was to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed.
Right.
And we succeeded in doing that. We got through that, because there are other countries in the world where there's patients outside in the parking garage and out in the street trying to get through this virus. And I think we did a great job of protecting our hospitals, and they're the ones that you need for anything medical, and that was the goal. It wasn't to stop the virus. It wasn't it was to save people as much as we could, but was to save our hospitals so they weren't overwhelmed and shut down.
And so after the county commissioners removed the mask mandate for the county, McCall reinstituted their mask mandate for McCall. Now, as a commissioner, when you see that contrary reaction, how do you sort of process that? So now in McCall, we continue to have our mask mandate. And yet the rest of the county doesn't have that imposition. How do you sort of read that? And is that a negative? Is that positive? How do you sort of watch other governments as they do what they do?
Well, it's interesting because the city of Boise did a mandate too about the same time as McCall, and the city of Boise is still on as well. And it kind of makes sense because that's where most of the cases came from in Valley County, or from a higher population urban area like McCall versus Cascade or Donley. We had a few from Cascade or Donley, but most of the cases were up here. So I think it's okay if the city council feels like they want to do that. I think they need to listen to their constituents and look at how many folks have been vaccinated up here, how many folks have had the disease and gone through it. Kind of look at the numbers and say, you know what, I think, we're maybe 30% or 40%. I don't know what those numbers are in McCall because I haven't kept track of that, but look at the data, and the data will tell you no new cases in the last 2 weeks. I would say, maybe you guys need to start thinking about pulling that back. taking the mandate off and let people take care of themselves, which is the conservative in me that's coming out there.
Now, those that are watching us tonight might notice that we don't have masks on. Now, we are in the city of McCall. And so why aren't we wearing masks at this moment?
Well, in my case, I caught the coronavirus the day before elections in November. In fact, all three of the commissioners came down with it. The other two came through it pretty well. I'm what's called the long term. I've had some heart damage. I've had some pretty severe lung damage. I was on antibiotics and prednisone and cortisone and that kind of stuff. I used a puffer quite a bit, and I just got my second shot about a week or so ago. And I think the second shot really kind of helped me come out of it. I'm feeling a lot better since that second shot. I'm still having problems with my voice and breathing. A challenge. I'm a rancher, so I buck a lot of bales, and I'm pretty, not athletic. I'm not athletic, but I do a lot of physical work, and so I have to kind of slow down once in a while and stop and get my air. And I know you're vaccinated.
I am,
and I think we're both safe. And I don't think either one of us could catch it from one another because we both had it. We've both been vaccinated, and I feel okay about that. If I was concerned, I would have my mask on.
Thank you. And so there's freedom there. It's the freedom to have a conversation without the mask mumble, as we're learning to call it. And so when we come to this idea of herd immunity is really what's happening between us grown large. It's the county, it's the state, it's our nation. And so it's the ability to operate reasonably freely without infecting each other. What do you sense is the ongoing role of government now as we're striving to achieve herd immunity?
Well, I thought we did a really great job through the health district and through the county of educating folks and letting them know this is how the disease works. So many folks are asymptomatic, and we kind of educated folks. The best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated. There was a lot of controversy about, which vaccine? There was, the Johnson & Johnson, and they found that there's some issues with that. There was the Moderna, there was the Pfizer. I happen to have two Moderna shots within a month of each other. Got along very well with both shots. The second shot was tougher than the first one. First one didn't bother me at all. The second one, I had some kind of some respiratory issues. I was very tired for a day or two, but came right out of it, and now I'm feeling a lot better. But there's so much information on the web, and people are getting information from different doctors throughout the world that the masks don't work and this doesn't work. And I would really encourage people to just talk to your local doctor. He's your friend. He's the guy that you see every day in your community, and ask him what he thinks, because I think you're going to hear a different story from him. I trust my local doctor. I think he's going to take good care of me, and he recommended I do this. And it's a really good feeling to know, hey, I've been vaccinated. I've done everything I can to protect myself, and that's just being smart.
The issue, as I've watched people, sort of revolves around masks. I have seen an awful lot of people who are terribly uncomfortable in their masks. And so they enter into the public space, they put it on or they don't. And as soon as they're out of the public space, they get it off. And you can see that they're very uncomfortable with their masks. One of the things that I tried to do early on is get a comfortable mask.
Right.
It's part of our community, and it is something that I think is incredibly important. I must have gone through 12 masks trying to find the one that allowed me to be comfortable. And so my challenge is I'm in them all the time in some of my roles in the community, and I had to have one that was comfortable. And so for those that are still struggling with the masks, I would encourage them to find one that's comfortable and to keep trying something. And I think that we would have a population that would be more open to the masks if the masks weren't so dang uncomfortable. And so it's just something that our conversation tonight, I think, it allows us to sort of work at that particular topic so that if you have to wear them, at least be comfortable when you're wearing them. And that, I hope, would raise that opportunity of folks to get the vaccine.
Well, and I know I've tried quite a few different masks. Finally found one that I can breathe through, and it's easier for me to talk. I find it very interesting because you look at some of the other countries in the world, like China and India, they wear masks all the time because of air pollution and just to protect themselves. And there's a lot of people in the world that wear a mask all the time, day in and day out. And we're fortunate in this country, we don't have that bad air pollution and that much that concern that we don't have to wear a mask all the time. But there was really not much else we could do as a community, as a nation, to slow this virus down other than wear masks. I mean, you can only wash your hands so many times, and you can only social distance so much. And there are times when you just have to be in amongst people and shopping in a grocery store or a hardware store that you need to wear that mask to protect yourself. And it just makes common sense.
Our focus is for those of our citizenry that are hesitant to get a vaccine. From your perspective, what would you like to say to those that remain hesitant?
Honestly, it goes back to talk to your doctor. Your doctor's going to give you the best advice. Don't listen to all the different stuff that's on the World Wide Web and some of the misinformation that's been coming out there. Talk to your neighbors who's been vaccinated. How did they get through it? Did it make them sick? Did it, do some research on your own and talk to your friends and talk to your doctor and find out, how they feel about it. And I think you're going to be convinced that this is the right thing to do. The sooner we're all vaccinated and we reach herd immunity, we don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's where I want to get everybody. And we're getting very close to that.
As a non-health person, you've had to go find sources of information. And I think we've all been frustrated with the incredible variety of information. We recognize some of it has got to be misinformation. So I think the citizens would appreciate knowing, where do you feel most confident when you go to the web and you're looking for information? Where do you feel most confident that the information you're getting is quality information and you can make decisions based on that information?
Well, the CDC is a great source. That's where the health districts get a lot of their information from. Like I said earlier, we have 2 doctors on the health district board that are very proactive on vaccines and how to handle pandemics, and smart people. We had the president of St. L's and the president of St. Luke's in on one of our meetings, actually pleading for us to do something back when the hospitals were filling up, and they all recommended that the masks. And so listen to the people that are in the trenches that know what they're doing. And like I said, just talk to your doctor. Your local doctor is probably going to help you more than anything else.
I'd like us to take a bit of future casting, and you always have to have a bit of a sense of where the future is, and as a leader, knowing us how to get to a better future. So I'd like to begin to do a bit of future casting at this stage. Some of our citizens are frustrated that the health information laws prevented the awareness of people who were sick from infecting others. Is there anything government should do to adjust the health information laws as we begin to think about what the next public health crisis should be?
I don't know. I think the health laws we got now are pretty reasonable. I know there's some controversy going on more at the state level. The state has a website, I think it's called ISIS, that deals with who has been vaccinated. Well, that's not public information. They can't release names and they can't put that information out there. And I don't think they should. But I'm concerned about, we're reading more stories in the news lately about if you want to fly, you're going to have to show a card. If you're going to go overseas, you're going to have to show a card that says you've been vaccinated. And those are the kind of things that I worry about as far as civil liberties and things being taken away from us. That's how those things kind of work themselves into the system. There's an awful lot in government that is you can't share with the public. It's private information, and you have to be very careful what you tell folks, and especially names and that kind of a deal. I don't really know how to improve that. I think we're in a spot in our society right now where, I'm afraid some of those things may end up someday going away, that you're going to have to show that you've been vaccinated for certain things. I mean, they do it in schools now with young kids, and so there's more rules like that that are being pushed by the liberal and conservative sides both. Yeah, I kind of related back to, I run cattle, and over the years we vaccinate cattle every year, and each cow has a number on her ear tag, and so we know who's had it and who hasn't had it. And it's kind of like managing the cow herd in the fact that you've got to kind of know that, hey, I'm going to get 90% of them vaccinated, so hopefully that herd immunity will kick in on the other 10%, and everybody will be protected long term. There's so much with the HIPAA rules and things that you cannot share with the public that sometimes it makes government look like a bad egg, because they can't divulge that information. We'd love to, because I think it would ease a lot of people's concerns, but we just can't share that information.
I think my question goes to the specificity of Valley County people who were sick. We're in a resort, and we know that there was a lot of our folks that were visitors that got sick, but their numbers transferred to wherever their primary residence was if they were state-based. And yet it wouldn't have been helpful is if we in our community would have known those numbers to have a better sense of what our rate of illness actually was in our area, primary resident or not. Does that warrant it? So if it's generalized, so we really don't know who they are, but we know that we have an illness rate happening in our region. Would that not be helpful if we were to make that adjustment somehow?
Well, we got that information through the county and through the health district, and they base that on a percentage of population, so many per 100,000. And if you had a high rate of above 5%, then you had a problem. The issue with our tourists coming up here sick and not getting reported up here is there's no other way that you can set up a system that says, no, that person probably caught that virus down in the Boise Valley and brought it up here. Yeah. I'm sure there's a few that were up here that maybe caught it up here too, but you have to do it on a county by county basis in order to keep track of that data. And the data really dictates what you do in the future.
And so if you alter the data, you're going to alter the outcome.
Well, if you alter the data, everybody has to do it the same.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning, there was a lot of mix up on, hey, there was folks up here that were credited for Ada County, for example. And that's where they live. That was their primary residence. And even though they might be up here for 6 months out of the year, they got credited to Ada County. And that was where a lot of the confusion on the data originally started. Over a period of 2 or 3 months, they really refined the parameters of reporting and where you're from, where's your primary residence, not your weekend residence. And as everybody knows up here, we have a lot of second homeowners up here. And it was a hard system to get that preferred data, but we had that all nailed down to where we knew what the percentage rate for each county was. And that's why Boise City still has a mask mandate, because it's a larger percentage per 100,000 population of infections. So I think it's a good idea for places like Boise City to keep the mask mandate for a while until they can bring that percentage down of the total population. And then you can start talking about, opening it back up down there.
Thank you. We know the variants are a deep concern for everyone everywhere. They're going to define whether we need booster shots. They're going to be defining an awful lot into our future. We've also seen that ski resorts are in a really unique position worldwide. Early on, there was a Swiss ski resort that seemed to have been an early super spreader event for Europe. What we're hearing now is Whistler has a severe issue with the Brazilian variant, and the Whistler ski resort seems to be struggling as a result of that. I'm wondering if that's not cueing us, that ski resorts might be our early warning system. Might they be the canary in the mine, if I could use that particular illustration, that maybe we should put some extra resources into our ski resorts because we're naturally going to get more of a broad population coming into our area. And if we were to do wastewater management or wastewater analysis, that we might be able to come up with an excellent way of forecasting what is happening in our greatest mix of possible variants. And I'm wondering if that idea has floated anywhere and whether it might be something we could consider.
Well, I think it was December of last year, both Tamarack and Brundage kind of approached us with what their protocols were going to be for the ski resort. And basically what it came down to is that we're not going to allow indoor dining because that's where most of the contamination was happening. And so they set up food booths outside and people had to social distance. You came up, you ordered your hot dog or whatever it is you got. And then when you got, then the next person came up. So I was very, very gratified to see that the ski resorts, both Brundage and Tamarack, really got on the ball early and set up some protocols, even with their staff. And I know in Tamarack's case, it was a mask mandate for staff before we even really.
Was it?
Yeah. And if you were warned once, if you did it a second time, you're immediately terminated. So they took it very serious. A lot of the contamination in the beginning was happening in restaurants and bars. I know in Boise Valley, we ended up, I believe it was in September, October, I don't know the date for sure. We had to go in and actually close down some bars because we gave them the protocol. These are the things you need to do to stay open, and they wouldn't do it. They ignored us. In fact, they kind of went the other direction, and so we came in and started pulling licenses in some of these businesses and said, we'll give you 2 weeks to come up with another plan. They came in with another plan. They did every other seating. They did away with dance floors. There was more ventilation. If you're sitting at a bar, you have to wear a mask. If you're sitting in a booth with your girlfriend or your wife, you don't have to. And all those protocols were set up, not only for bars and restaurants, but of course, the movie theaters was a big place where you put 200 people in the same room, you're going to have an issue. And there were some things that we could not fix. But what we tried to do in the health district is we went to those different businesses and said, look, you guys are a big source and we can track it where these folks have been. All that through investigation. I know in the health district, I think we hired 43 more people on staff just to do trace back and to call folks where have you been, which businesses you go to. So we could dial that in pretty well where people were getting infected. Then we went to those businesses and said, you've got to come up with different protocol. Otherwise, you're probably going to get shut down. And most of them did very well. Most of them came back. That's when we got every other table in the restaurants, and we started seeing plexiglass go up. We started seeing masks on the staff, and it worked. It slowed it down, and most of the people listened to us and did a great job. Some that couldn't and never would, they're probably still closed down.
Has our sewer districts done any analysis to help us
Not
know what
Not up here, but in the Boise Valley. And what we found is it's a great place to check and see if there's variants coming in of the virus. That's where they're going to show up first, is usually in the sewer systems. And so we have people that go every day. Part of the health district, job is to then take samples and bring it back to the lab, epidemiologists that go through that stuff and they look for variants. And that's when we discovered that we had the African or the South American variant down in Caldwell. And we tracked that down really quick and got on that one quick. And those people were isolated, told to stay home, don't travel, don't go out. They ordered food in. I mean, it was a hard thing to do, but you only had to do it for a couple of weeks. And then once you got through it, and everybody was through quarantine, then the world was good again, which is only fair to ask of anybody, I think.
So maybe our resort towns should consider that as doing sewage monitoring into the future to see whether the variants are cropping up in our.
And that's something I'll look into and see. I know it's kind of spendy, but we have McCall and Donley and Cascade that we could go and take samples of those and see what variants are showing up here. I'll do some research on that and see what it would take to get that process done through the House District. That's their job. So,
and if it's worth it. I would hope you are correct when you stated that we haven't had a pandemic for 100 years, and I think we all are hoping that it's another 100 years before we have another major one. Sadly, I think we might be exposed to one before then. And so the role of government is to pass on the knowledge of what you've learned to the next generation of leadership. And I'm wondering what you would recommend to those that you have to pass that baton to. What did we do well, and what could we have strengthened or done better if the next pandemic were upon us? What would you recommend?
well, in the beginning, when the governor put on the restricted travel, non-essential travel, I think that maybe was a little overreaction on his part. But you have to understand, back in March at that time, nobody knew anything about the virus. We had no vaccine. We had nothing really to go after it with. And I think there was some people that felt like their feelings were hurt because they were considered non-essential. But I think we could have maybe moved them into a different category because they were essential, especially for our seniors and super seniors. Some of those services went away. I think we should have jumped on the nursing home, the restrictions there sooner. We had some contamination, not so much from staff, but from families coming in to see great grandma in the nursing home. That we should have done a better job of maybe screening those folks so that they, could talk to each other through a sheet or, plexiglass or something. But we had a lot more exposure that way. That was a valuable lesson. And of course, New York, that's all you hear about is what they did to the nursing homes back there. And it failed big time. A lot of people lost their lives because of it. It was not the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so we've learned from other folks and their mistakes they've made. Overall, though, I think we did a really great job, especially up here. We've only lost, I think, 8 people from Valley County to this virus. But we've had a lot of people like myself that are long-termers that are still dealing with it. And given it time, I hope to get back to normal health and back to my old self again, but we shall see.
Commissioner Hasbrouck, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
I have really learned a lot, and that's, I think, one of my main goals is keep learning. And I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm very appreciative of your time. Do you have any final thoughts or comments that you wish you would have said? Is there anything that you'd like to adjust a little bit before we close off tonight?
Well, I guess my big thought for people to think about is that right now there seems to be kind of a scorn for politicians. Politicians are kind of the brunt of jokes for a lot of people, but there are good people in government. We all live here. We all see each other. We all go through the same thing that everybody else does. And I would hope that people would give us more confidence and more trust. And I'm not saying we're all perfect. We're all good, but a lot of us have a heart for caring about our community. And that's my big thing. That's why I ran for the office, because I care about this county. I've been here my whole life. I've seen things I like. I've seen things I don't like. And I want to be there. I want to show up and try and influence whatever that decision is, whether it's the virus or subdivision or roads or there's a whole plethora of issues going on all the time. And as a commissioner, you have to kind of have a 30,000 foot bird's eye view of things, because if you get down in the trenches, you get lost and it gets overwhelming. And so you have to know the people that you can call if you have an issue that you can trust to get you through a crisis, or how do we solve this? How do we fix that? What can we do here? And use the people that you know. A lot of politicians don't. They just kind of make up their own mind and they don't listen to their constituents. And I think that to me is the ultimate slap in the face, when you feel like you're in a position of authority that you'll make the decision for everybody else. That's, to me, is not a good leader. To me, a good leader is let's bring folks in, let's try and reach an agreement in the middle, let's figure out what we got to do to fix this issue and then do it. And be ready to pull the trigger when you have that decision. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as a public servant, and thank you to your family. I know that every public servant has folks that are supporting them and allow them to do what they're doing. And I certainly want to thank your family as well for what they've done. Thank you for the tough decisions. I had people come to me after the mask mandate and say, you need to talk to Commissioner Hasbrouck. He's the one that really powered this through. And in my family, we had lots of folks that were terribly nervous of what was happening. And they were so thankful that you were a powerhouse in getting the mask mandate in place when you did. So I want to thank you for that as well. But thank you especially for giving us your time tonight.
You bet. Thanks for having me here, Brian. Everybody stay safe.
And thank you all for watching tonight. I trust you learned as much as I did. We'd invite you to come back next week. We'd like to do our final conversation between my wife and I. My wife, Lynette, has served as our producer throughout this series. And so she's been here listening to each and every one of our speakers. And what we'd like to do is have a conversation trying to sum up all that we have learned over the last 6 weeks. And we'll try and highlight some of the points and comments and develop them so that we can have hopefully a helpful package for those that are trying to put information together so they can make a decision on the vaccine. And so there are 5 conversations that have occurred so far that are now on YouTube. And I trust tonight, if this was your first one, has piqued your interest as to what has been happening on the community conversations at McCall College. And so I'd encourage you to go back to YouTube, /McCall College, one word, and would you take a look at the other conversations? What you'll find there is a wonderful conversation with an epidemiologist. And we've all had to learn an awful lot in this pandemic. But Dr. Mike Weiss was the one that taught us first about what was happening. And you'll find a wonderful 2-part conversation with Dr. Weiss. And then there was a great conversation with our public health folks, the folks at Central District Health that you are hearing about tonight. And you'll see a conversation with those who represent us at Central District Health. And then one of our great pharmacists will offer information. Kevin Ellis at Save On Pharmacy has a wonderful conversation of the vaccines and vaccination. And you'll see his comments there. And so many of us trust Kevin for our pharmacy needs, and we're thankful that he gave us some information. And last week was such an intriguing conversation between 5 people who had experienced COVID-19. And Elt will add to that number with his comments tonight. And his story was heart-rending. And so many of those stories give us information on what this disease is all about from a feet on the ground perspective of those who have experienced it. And I would really encourage you to go and listen to those folks, local folks and regional folks that have something to say about COVID-19. And so if you're interested in the other conversations, they're at www.youtube.com/McCall College. That's all one word. I also want to cue you what we're talking about now for May. And we have 4 speakers coming in and talking about pandemic mental health. And Commissioner Elt gave us a little cueing on teen suicide tonight. And that should really cause us to want to know more. That's something that's very much information that we don't hear enough about, but it's there and it's happening. And so our mental health is something that we can talk about and we want to talk about. And so for 4 lectures in May, will begin to bring people together, starting with Central District Health, that are sending people to Zoom to help us begin to understand our region. We're going to have local counselors who help people, and we want to hear what's happening in their practices. And then we have organizations that are here to help. And so with those 4 lectures, we look forward to continuing our conversation on COVID-19. For those that have watched us tonight and those who will watch us, thank you for your time.